If you look at like the number one source of hiring, it's still referrals, but almost nobody thinks about it strategically.
I found some of the best relationships I've built in my career are the people I didn't hire.
One of the things I do believe is that generally great people only have one speed.
So if you're giving advice to maybe a sales leader departing on LinkedIn or somebody that's been at big for a while, what would that advice?
The ability to identify and convince and manage top talent is like so important for all leaderships. I mean, what is leadership? You're basically enabling others to be successful to achieve your common shared goal.
Welcome to Whispered Hiring, the podcast where we talk with senior leaders about how they find, vet, attract, and grow go-to-market talent. I'm Andy Mowat, founder at Whispered. Today, I'm joined by Brian Frank. Brian's one of the top operational go-to-market leaders I know. He's led RevOps at LinkedIn for 10 years and grew and mentored a number of the top RevOps people in the Valley today. After LinkedIn, Brian was COO at Cameo and is an advisor to many great companies. Brian is now focused on investing at Permanent Capital, where he works with a group of partners. They're all former operating partners in go-to-market. They invest at the Series A and really help accelerate the go-to-market motion for the companies they invest in. Brian, it's great to have you here.
Thanks, dude. Stoked to be here. It's one of my two things, my favorite things. One is RevOps, passionate about it, and the other is recruiting. So
I know I knew about you for years before we met, and I had so much fun meeting. I'm excited. We talked a lot at our coffee about how you thought about recruiting. So I'm really excited to go deep on it today.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, maybe kick it off with just, I'd love to get your philosophy and kind of how you formed at LinkedIn that we talked about, and then we can go deep into the different stages of recruiting.
Yeah, maybe I'll start off a little bit thinking like going back of the Wayback Machine. So, it's like, as we talked about before, Andy, I didn't start off my career in RevOps. Didn't start off my career in sales. I actually started off my career as a lawyer. And then I went into finance, and then I went into sales. And when I had my first sales job, I think that was the first time I ever actually recruited a salesperson to actually like work on my team. And maybe the first time I'd actually, I remember working with a lot of recruiters. I'm sure I did other contacts, but I really have a strong memory of that because I remember how painful that process was. I felt like so helpless. I was waiting for this recruiter to post jobs. He would send me these resumes that came through. They were not great or terrible. I was often like, why are you even sending these to me? Right. Yeah. I later learned it's because if you set the expectations really low, later when you come out with someone who's better, it's like, oh my God, yes. So it was a tactic, but at the time,
that is interesting because I've heard a number of other recruiters say, I'm going to show you the candidates you can't get. And then I'll tell you why you can't get them. And then when I bring them, they'll be there. So it's interesting to hear all the different ways and
the way to do it. Yeah. I mean, that's how this guy did it. And, clever. And so it was just really, really frustrating. And I remember thinking, Matt, there has to be a better way than this. The other thing I remember is like, as you look through dozens of people who just seem, you start getting glazed over because they seem similar. You start sharing like, how do I distinguish? How do I distinguish? And this concept of referrals comes up, which has like really been this like crazy thing in my mind that gets so overweighted for the wrong reason. I would like take these referrals from, somebody in engineering's cousin's ex-wife or something. And like, they would show up in these meetings and with like no real clear connection other than the fact that they knew somebody who knew somebody. And, somehow we would replace this lack of correlation to the requirements of the job with this fact that they knew somebody and therefore they were good or better or more reliable or you had more confidence in hiring them. And I believe that that's the reason why today, if you look at like the number one source of hiring, it's still referrals. Right? We like use referrals as this way of like that, but almost nobody thinks about it strategically. It's just like, who do you know? And they send me people, and then it's just another pipeline input into your sourcing process. And it's such a great opportunity to use it, but it's also just like so wildly abused in so many ways. I find it to be amusing. But I remember this early phase, I was so frustrated with this lack of recruiting. And when I went into LinkedIn, so I left my former company, I went and started the sales team at LinkedIn. And, for the first time, someone gave me a license to LinkedIn Recruiter. And for anyone who doesn't know what LinkedIn Recruiter is, it is the product that every recruiting professional in B2B uses on the planet, pretty much. It's like the go-to product. And I could start like looking at all these people and like literally my eyes opened to two things. Not just to the importance of recruiting to the hiring manager, but also just like, this is how it works. And this is how you reach out. And this is how you find people. And this is how you start sourcing this process. And so ever since then, I've just been incredibly passionate about how recruiting can change the trajectory of a hiring manager's career.
I love that. Maybe I think we've talked a little bit, but I'd love you to talk about how you get prepared for the hire before you do it. Because like you, I've seen so many people get lazy, which is they don't bother writing a JD. They just start pinging people and saying, "Hey, who do you know?" I talked to a company the other day where they were like, "Hey, we just use ChatGPT to write 5 JDs. We don't really know what the job is, but we figure we'll just start interviewing people and figure it out." And I'm like, "Oh!" And I think you've spent a lot of time thinking about how do you get prepared to interview. Then what do you need to do before you start the process?
Yeah, I think of recruiting is 5 stages. And the first stage is planning. Right. And so Um, that's my Myers-Briggs characteristic. I'm a planner. And so like I always thinking about like how do we sort of set everything up for success later. Um, the job description actually for me comes later. It doesn't come until after the intake calibration, which is the next phase. In the planning phase, I like to understand like why do we actually need to hire this person?
Mhm.
Why, justify the hire, make sure it's needed. Number one. Number two is like, what's their scope? Who's their manager? How much are they making? What's their title? Where are they located? All the basics that you have to be able to answer as a hiring manager, like they have to be there for the recruiting team to be able to execute on, right? So you need to know that. You also need to know their start date and you need to know their interview team, like who's on the interview. If you just know all these things ahead of time, which are all questions that the hiring manager knows, uh, that pretty much can satisfy planning. The only thing that's hard to get is comp. Comp, you do need to get some benchmarking and talk to people and understand like what's the amount that I should expect to pay for this role, both in terms of base variable and equity. But short of that, pretty much everything else you should be able to understand what you really want and what you really need from a planning perspective.
I think that definitely fits for a mature company like LinkedIn. You guys invest in those Series A companies, and a lot of the advice there to founders is always be hiring, always be meeting people. I'm curious if you've ever broken that rule to hire some great candidate that you've met, right? Does somebody ever call you up either, and maybe you do that for your portfolio companies now, and you say to the CEO, "Hey, Bob, I've met this amazing candidate. You should just meet this person, even if you're not hiring right now." And that seems to be the talent partners and recruiters do a lot of that. So how disciplined do you keep that? Or if you find a surprising candidate that's you're not
I
ready
think
for
of those
now?
as two separate things, right? So I think planning is related to I know I need to make a hire, right?
Yes.
I'm hiring a director of sales operations. I'm hiring a VP of sales. I believe as the hiring manager, as the CEO or the VP of sales, that I need that role. I need that person on my team. And now the question is like all those details of the structure. That's what planning is. What I think you're referring to is just more of like kind of I would call it a building pipeline, right? And sort of like meeting people, understanding who's in the market, who's available, what's out there. I think that's a very valuable thing because you do run into those really exceptional people. And that goes back to this concept once again, we were talking about referrals, right? People know each other differently, right? You're in my relationship is different than someone who's been my boss for 10 years and we worked hand in hand together, right? So, you and I have met 2 or 3 times. Um, but we haven't spent that much time together. So when you send over a referral to me, right? You don't know me as well, and I don't know you as well. Versus somebody who I have a deep relationship with. Likewise, you are someone who's passionate about recruiting and talent, as am I. So I know that when you send someone over, that you have a high bar for who you want. And you know that I have a high bar. I don't want you to send over somebody that's just like you're being nice and you're sharing the resume because you met this person and they seem like they're okay. And hey, Brian should get to know them too. I'm actually not interested in meeting those people. I'm only interested in meeting people that you send over to me, Andy, who are amazing and that you would hire yourself and that you think I would be a fool not to hire.
Yes.
Those are the people I want to talk to. Right. And once I believe that you know what that is for me and that we have shared calibration in that mind, then you become this incredible, valuable source and vice versa. I want to be the same for you. If I come to you and say, hey, I know this person, they were the best salesperson on LinkedIn. They're exceptional. Like you shouldn't interview anyone else. You should just hire this person immediately. I fully believe that with conviction. And that's the person that I'm presenting to you. And those are the great referrals that are so incredibly valuable.
I love that. Can I do a deviation? I'd be curious one thing. We've got a podcast guest coming up that was a top sales leader at LinkedIn. And
Yeah.
I'm really excited to talk to a person. He's running sales at Supabase right now. I'm curious. I've seen, if you go to LinkedIn, and I use LinkedIn as an example, but being in the talent space when I was at Culture Amp and as well at Upwork, I feel like we often hired a lot of the LinkedIn people. And at LinkedIn, you would have a enablement team, you would have an ops team, you would have all the support functions and the training and the onboarding that you might not have at a Series A or Series B company. And so I'm curious, I'd always said like I've seen a decent chunk of LinkedIn sales leaders struggle once they don't have that infrastructure. And so I'm curious, maybe it's a more general question, but it is for those people that have been at bigger companies where they've had all that support infrastructure, like how successful do you see them when they go to smaller, more early stage companies? And is that a profile that generally works, or how do you analyze that?
It depends on the person.
Mhm.
Right. So I think it's, so there's several truisms out there, right? What is a truism? I'm not sure the exact definition, to be honest, but I believe it's this thing that we believe to be true, but we know sometimes it's not.
I like that.
Stereotypes, call them generalizations, whatever it is. Like one of the things that we believe to be true, but no one talks about is that most hiring managers prefer to hire passive candidates as opposed to active ones.
Mhm, mhm.
Now, that may sound controversial to some. It's not to me, but
It's not to me either.
to me, it's more common sense. You assume that the best candidates already have a job, aren't looking for a job. Now we know that's not fully true. Sometimes it's the exact opposite. But the reality is, on the average, on the general, in the majority case, we believe that that's true, and that's why hiring managers want to go after passive. That's one of the reasons why hiring managers sometimes go after passive candidates. It's also true that some people, are going to thrive in an environment where a lot of other stuff is done for them and they can only focus on one thing they have to do, and where others need, are better in chaos. And there's no question. I used to tell the junior salespeople, I ran all the SD and the college graduate programs at LinkedIn for a long time, and I would tell the new SDs always like, if you can't be successful in sales at LinkedIn, you probably shouldn't be in sales.
Yeah.
Because yes, we gave a lot. I mean, it's like a amazing product and it's super disruptive, and some might call it monopolistic, and it's it's a dominant tool, and we try to do everything we can to make the salespeople's life easy and to basically help them close business. Um, and so yes, if you grew up in that culture and that's all you know, and you think that that's the way it is in a Series A startup, you're going to be sadly mistaken. So. But then I've also seen people who are just very flexible and they love this concept of like scrapping and building and doing it themselves. And they came from the LinkedIn, experience, and they've done incredibly well in startups. We've had LinkedIn has a great ecosystem of startup founders. So
In assessing that, when you're interviewing talent, how do you figure out the ones that can step off into the deep end without the support and the floaties and things like that? What questions do you ask to understand that?
that's a great question. Right. So, and in assessing the talent that you're looking for. So like first of all, I would start with this concept of like, what is the skill I'm looking for? Right. Which is like, are they going to be great in a startup environment? And, let's say I was a head of sales or something, I'm hiring for that like that. So I would ask them like, you know, just very pointedly, like, what's your plan given that there's no enablement function, there's no RevOps function, there's no onboarding function, there's no analytics, there's no sales systems tools, there's no biz ops support. What's your plan? Like, how are you going to basically provide all this and do all this for your team and for yourself? Um, with the concept of like, have they even thought about it? Number one, if they have thought about it, like, what are their thoughts about how they're going to pull them off? Are they going to just hire a giant team of people, or are they going to, where are they going to step in and lead? Where are they going to rely on others? How are they going to be able to solve these problems on their own? So
Mhm.
I think a lot of it is, just sort of testing that thesis of what the skill is against a series of questions that hopefully reveal, what their thinking is in this area and whether they're capable. Now, there's a big difference between thinking and being good at speaking and answers versus actually doing, right? And then the follow-up is always like, well, so you can give me some examples of where you've done something like that before and where you think there's a parallel. Have they been scrappy? Have they done something? One of the times you hire, a lot of times you see younger people have started their own startups at some point or done something. Whenever I see someone like in that entrepreneurial spirit and have done that or worked in something, and even in college, that always says a lot to me that they're out there and they're hustlers, and
I,
hustlers can figure out a way to get it done.
I agree. I love the been a big company, had all the tools, succeeded, built the network, but then maybe got a little egg on the face or struggled. And I think I'm seeing more and more companies want to hire those ex founders, people that have rolled up their sleeves a little bit. It's powerful. I think a lot of people like wrap up a failed startup and say, "Oh crap, what do I do next?" But those are actually some of the most attractive people because they've had to figure out AI. They've had to figure out how to hustle. They've figure out how to sell every day as well too.
Yeah.
So that's
I don't want to put myself exactly in that category because I don't like to think my startup was a failed startup since it's still going around. Uh, but yeah, I ran my own startup for 2 years after Cameo, and the company built an AI robotics product. It's like literally a robot that's
Mhm.
built. And wow, that was the hardest job of my life. But it taught me like all the difficult nitty gritty. I ran every function, not just
Yeah.
sales and marketing, but like, investor relations and finance and HR and everything. So when you're a team of one, you learn to do a lot. You learn to do a lot of different stuff.
I like that. So if you're giving advice to maybe a sales leader departing on LinkedIn or somebody that's been at big for a while, what would that advice be that you would give somebody?
Uh, Honestly, dovetails great into what we're talking about, which is
Yeah.
like become a master of recruiting. Like, I don't think people intuitively understand how important it is to the success of a leader in a business. I think I alluded to earlier saying it correlates to your success. I truly believe that. I believe that if you are a great hirer, you can survive even if you're a crappy manager or crappy at your regular job because the ability to identify and convince and manage top talent is like so important for all leaderships. I mean, what is leadership? You're basically enabling others to be successful to achieve your common shared goal. And you know, being able to do recruiting is in my mind, like really, really, really important part of that. And the thought that leaders outsource that to these third parties and say, here, go find me a person. It's insane to me.
I saw a post on LinkedIn the other day where some recruiters were going back and forth saying we should take the hiring decision away from the hiring manager and make it because we know better. I'm just like, I wanted to smack myself in the head. Maybe at the junior IC role where it's so repetitive and recruiters are just running them over and over and over again. But at the senior levels, I agree with you. If you outsource that, it's
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, listen, they're just like people recruit. There's all types of recruiters. There's some recruiters who are incredibly great hires and smart and capable, and I would love for them to hire every one of my people. And then there's a lot of recruiters who are just filling recs. It's yeah, that's their job is to fill the rec, right? So, and then there's outsourced recruiters who are basically paid on the commission. Like their job is to, get you to close on this rack, right? So as soon as possible. So it's uh there's a whole bunch of mixed incentives across this structure, but in my mind, there's never an excuse for a hiring manager to say, go figure out my recruiting and come back and give me candidates to interview. It's like, if you're not involved in the planning, in the intake and the sourcing, not just in the interviews and the closing process, you're not doing your job.
I couldn't agree more. Talk to me a little bit. You get a lot of thoughts around how do you calibrate and get ready for that process? Like maybe go a little bit deeper here. How you approach calibration.
Planning, and then there's this concept, intake. So intake is traditionally where the recruiter sits down with the hiring manager, ask them a bunch of questions, which you still need to do. Um, at that point, the recruiter has to take that information and turn it into two things. One is they have to turn it into sourceable data, because at the end of the day, these things are Boolean operator driven, now AI driven, but still you have to have the right way of structuring the query, the statement to the AI, whatever it is, to get the right results back that basically are going to get things. So you have to structure the data in a way that's helpful to source and also to evaluate. Because I like to have the same concept of like, let's have a structured evaluation process where we can basically say, this is an element that we're going to evaluate, and we believe that this candidate basically stacks up against those criteria with this type of measurable score. So I'm one of the believers in this concept of a score. And what I like to do is I like to take all that input, that intake, build it into a set of evaluation criteria. I use one, I've actually published it on LinkedIn. It's one of my earlier posts called the talent target. But basically it takes four elements. It's skills, experience, references, and X factor. Those are my 4 different categories. And I break all the sort of elements of these individuals into those types of elements. And then I say, okay, what does the absolute perfect person look like? The perfect tens across the board, right? Like, what would they look like? And if we could imagine them, this is maybe back to your thing you said about like why you can't hire the best person or whatever. But what is the as they say in recruiting, the purple squirrel look like? Unicorn that you have to hire. And then you have this meeting where you basically have the recruiter run it. You take 20 profiles that are like roughly sourced in this thing. You get the interview candidates, you see the interview panels there and the hiring manager there. And you spend an hour and you literally just go through each profile against those criteria. And you say, what do you think this person is? What do you think this person is? What do you think this person is? Just with respect to the stuff that you can discern off of their LinkedIn profile or resume or whatever.
Yep.
I use LinkedIn profiles because it's just easier. But at the end of the day, what you're trying to do is you're trying to do, one, are you all scoring the same, right? If the hiring manager keeps saying that this person's a 6 and everyone else says they're 8, like what's going on, right? In terms of like how they're evaluating the people. 2 is you're trying to figure out like the interview panel should know like what's their job later. Their job is not to restate the obvious. Their job is to align or not align with the recommendations from the recruiter and the hiring manager, and to assess skills that the hiring manager and the recruiter could not assess because they have unique skill and knowledge in some area that those two people couldn't assess. But nothing worse than getting feedback from a hiring manager, which is like, well, they seem junior. Well, like I can read that junior. Obviously, I brought them in anyways, and I didn't care that they were junior, right? But we agreed in our calibration meeting that it was okay to get a junior person if they were exceptional.
Yep.
So like, don't tell me they're junior. Tell me whether or not they're exceptional.
On the exceptional and X factors, I'll definitely link to your article when we publish this. I'd love to do that. But I'd love to have you just maybe talk about what is X factor for you for a couple minutes. I think
it's a catch-all. But usually it's that thing about the person that sort of goes like, wow, that's really interesting. Oftentimes it's another experience for me, right? So for example, I interviewed this guy one time, and that's how I actually got my tagline on LinkedIn. I'll tell the quick story. So got a referral from Jeff Weiner. Jeff has only sent me 2 referrals ever, right? He and I share a bar for assessing talent. I knew if it came from Jeff, it was great. And I had like I was hiring for sales ops or some role in like that. And the guy came through and he was an ex a lieutenant colonel in the Navy SEALs. He was a Navy SEAL commander. And he was the one who briefed like Obama on all the missions, like, that SEAL Team 6 mission to get Osama bin Laden. And came in and he's like, like I'm leaving the military. I'm looking for a job and I'm interested in operations. And I said, well, I'm thinking that your operations and my operations are pretty different. What are operations to you? And he said, operations are turning vision into reality.
Hmm.
And I said, that is what I do. I like that. So we had a great interview. Sad. The bad part of the story, I didn't hire him. He ended up becoming a venture partner at another place. So he's had a great successful career since then. But um, what stood out for me was like you could tell this guy like that was just like this really really unusual exceptional thing, right? And so when I talk about like what's like that weird X factors, like were they a Navy SEAL? That's unusual. That's this thing that they're bringing to the world, bringing to us. And so it's another career. It's some amazing accomplishment that they've had. It could be, some skill that's very unusual that allows you to do something, but it's whatever it is that sort of like, wow, that really makes this person stand out in my mind as different and can add more value in this space. Maybe it's their background, whatever it is that's there. That's the X factor to me.
Are you hiring people that don't have any X factor? Could you be a 10 out of 10 on skills, experience, and references and a little bit vanilla and still get hired by Brian?
All the time. All the time. Yeah. Yeah. This is not like a must have all 10 out of 10 kind of thing. As we said, that's the purple squirrel. What we're trying to do is like, what's the hireable thing? So the other part of the calibration that's good is that we know that we're not looking for 10 out of 10. If we find 10 out of 10, amazing. But like the reality is like, we're okay with 8 out of 10. Generally, in my skill, when you find that two things come up in the process. Number one is that perfect is not necessary to be able to hire. And number two, um, people generally fall into a couple of different, I would call them sort of archetypes, right? There's the people who are like the really experienced, been doing it a long time kind of folks. And then there's the up and comer, like future star folks. And the question is, there's twofold. One is like, and this is an important note, for the recruiter, I think, in this process, but also for the hiring manager to be aware of, like, what kind of person does this leader need to hire? And what kind of person does this leader manage best? If you're a very senior leader, if you're Satya Nadella at Microsoft, it doesn't make any sense to hire a future star. He has like 20 direct reports or something. He doesn't have time to mentor and develop somebody. He needs a bunch of like superstar experienced people. But a lot of Series A companies would be better off hiring a future star who's young and hungry and really wants to basically be able to achieve this thing.
I think you also may, as a leader, want a portfolio too, right? If you have all rising stars and you've got to mentor them all, you're doing all the pattern recognition. But if you have a team of leaders underneath you that are all working together, you can take one or two that maybe are rising stars. I do feel like this up and comers, particularly these early rounds that you invest in, are very attractive to companies right now. It feels like they're steering more towards builders, people that get their hands dirty or pulling their own data with SQL versus managers. And I'm curious if you see that in the market where your companies are steering more and more towards the up and comers.
Yeah, I think it's always been a preference of the person who's the leader and who they want to hire and who they do well on their team. I mean, I tend to push more of the up and comer. I like to see people being put in their biggest job ever and pushed, with that challenge. It goes once again towards all these truisms or stereotypes, which is like, well, if this is your biggest job, you're going to try harder. You're going to be more motivated. You're going to be hungry and humble and go for it. Versus if you've done this big job for a long time, do you really care anymore? Right? Are you as motivated? Are you as hungry in in those worlds? And so, and not to there's a lot of great experienced people who are super hungry and super good and super capable. And one of the things I do believe is that generally great people only have one speed.
Mm.
They're like,
That's
it's not like they like, they may slow down over the years, but like they're still running at top speed. That's just who they are.
I feel like I take that way. You probably do too. It's like you can't shut it off on a weekend. You're still thinking about it. That's
if you're gonna go, you're gonna go. It's you just can't stop. And so it's if you have a to me, what's more important, one of the most important things is seeing when I evaluate LinkedIn profiles is like, does the person have a history of success and progression within their company?
yes.
What I don't like is people who job hop from company to company in order to basically drive their career. So, they start off as an AE and then they go someplace to be a manager and then they go someplace to be a director. And then, 6 years later, they're a VP somewhere. All they've just been doing is shopping their career. That may be a very efficient way of growing your career from a candidate perspective. But what it says to me is that they're really good at self-promotion and selling themselves. I have no idea what they're actually good at their job because none of the companies they worked at never got a chance to invest in them and actually see if they could.
We see a lot of people at Whisper that say, "Hey, I want to move to the next thing." And I'm like, and I need to make a career pivot. I'm like, the best way to make a pivot is in your current company with a manager that believes in you, because you can go from running sales to running marketing in a company much easier than you can try to pitch that outside. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, I know. And then you dig a little bit deeper and it's like they're not getting along with their manager. They're not, and there's reasons behind it. But I'm with you. I think a lot of people do. I love seeing that test and push yourself at each different place.
Yeah. Yeah. When I see someone who started off as an SD and now they're a director of sales somewhere it could be at Oracle, and there's no saying Oracle's. I was like, it's a pretty old school company. But when I see that, I'm impressed. It's hard to work your way up through that machine. You have to persevere, you have to tolerate a bunch of shit, and you have to be good.
True, true. Do you stay in touch with those people like that Navy SEAL guy? I found some of the best relationships I've built in my career are the people I didn't hire. Do you stay in touch with interesting people that have made impressions upon you, even if they weren't the one you picked?
All the time, yes, all the time. Yeah, his name is John Rodella. He's fantastic. I speak to a lot of people in my pipeline who've become like good friends. Actually, I have some really great friends who are in sales ops. One of the guys who's like who's amazing sales ops leader. His name is Jake Offwagen, and he's the guy I tried to recruit like 5 times, and I think we made him 2 or 3 offers along the way. But he's a fantastic leader, and I did hire him actually for a couple other companies I work for too. So
I think a lot of people don't realize that, right? People think like it's a transaction. I didn't get the job. Brian's done, but I've made some great. I mean, Eric Jang at Zoom like spent 3 hours with me one time talking to me about my career, and it's like you give and you get back, and it's amazing. Like I had a guy I interviewed to run all of GTM analytics. He came in number 2, but he was so persistent I ended up hiring him to run MOPS, right? And it's like you can do those. I think a lot of people miss out on the candidates. We're talking about it from the hiring manager side, but on the candidate side, there are real opportunities to build real relationships with people that might not say yes to you, but that's okay if you approach it in the right way and with the right maturity.
and even I've even had candidates that we've said no to, but I still maintain a relationship with them.
Oh, those are good. No,
So,
I exactly do those as well too. And it's like people had a chance to meet you and get to know you, and they may have missed out if they didn't take that.
yeah,
I feel like we've covered kind of intake and calibration a little bit and sourcing. Should we shift over to kind of how you interview and analyze when you get someone in front of you, Brian?
sure. So there's a couple of interviews. So I like the recruiter to sort of, I would say, validate the core assumptions of the profile and of the company. And what do I mean with it? Like, do they actually live in Colorado? Right? What is their job? Where are they working now? I mean, there's a lot of things that, as the LinkedIn profiles are not exactly synonymous with truth. And so you can get closer to the truth, hopefully, by asking questions and getting a sense of like, what's there. So I like to validate remember, everything is based off this concept of like, we assume, I'm only talking to people that hit a high enough score on my assessment that I did in the calibration activity to actually want to talk to them. And then I'll basically, after that, I'll start, once I start having those interviews, then I'm assessing, once again, validating those criteria. If everything is good and they check off in terms of like it's accurate and the things that you need to actually assess in human form that you can't, like communication. You might want someone who's a communicator. Very difficult to assess that with it from a LinkedIn profile. You might be able to with you just some internet research and see some of their stuff, but most of the time you don't. So you get that when you actually interact with somebody and see what kind of person are they and how do they communicate? How do you get along with them? But so the recruiter does this assessment, then they'll turn over to the hiring manager. And the hiring manager's job is to basically test them about like, what would they do in the job? The hiring manager shouldn't have to walk through their career again, right? Because that's already getting mobile recruiter to basically validate that everything happened that we thought happened. Now it's really just about, tell me about what you do here. Tell me about it. To me, the best hiring manager thing is it's a series of hypotheticals about like, what would you do if you had the job? Let me tell you about all the problems I need to get fixed. Well, what should we do? Right? I want that candidate to be a consultant giving me advice. If they are doing a really great job of it, that's a great sign of that. Okay, this person, as well as like, do I like them? Are they the right type of personality for me? Are they going to fit well within my company and the different aspects of them? I'm looking for certain characteristics. The things I typically look for is I want to see someone who's like motivated and like very smart and analytical and is very hardworking and committed. And so the questions I ask oftentimes are on the surface below trying to get at those types of things, right?
I think there's a large fit of just how will you and that person mesh personally. There's the Brian style, there's their style. And to me, anyways, I can find a shortcut that process are really important as well.
Yeah. And so once I get my top 2, 3, 4, 5 into that thing, then I'll bring in the interview panel and we'll schedule out the interviews. Usually I like to do one-on-ones as opposed to a panel because I want the interviewers either go deep on something that they're at subject matter expertise in, like Slim's hiring a RevOps person and I want, and they need to have like deep quantitative skill in SQL queries or something. It's been a long time since I did a SQL query. I'm gonna have someone else validate that skill other than myself, right? So to make sure that they can, how is their knowledge here and what can they do? Because I can just assess it based upon profile, but they can assess it based upon real questions and asking details. So you want the hiring panel to assess the special knowledge that they have, as well as to generally say, do you generally agree with the assumptions we have for this profile based off your interview? And then ultimately, and I'll share questions with them too if they need questions. And then the last piece I usually do is I do a case study, and that's usually just with the final 2. I don't like to do it with more than that. It's a big ask for a case study for somebody to commit that time, and unless they've actually shown that they're that deep into the process, I found that if you ask a case study too early in the process, people actually bail out. They're like, it's not time, and I don't want them to bail out because it's too much time. I find that if you stick with it later, they'll do it later once they get deeper into the process.
That's exactly what we coach, right? Like the case study is the opportunity to assess how interested are you in it. And maybe I haven't gotten to know Brian. Maybe I haven't really understood or gotten excited about something, or maybe I haven't understood why LinkedIn is such an exciting place. And people may use that. Everybody assumes, oh, just spend 2 hours, but everyone knows you don't spend 2 hours. One interesting thing I'm observing is with AI, companies are increasingly not doing take homes anymore. They're doing more whiteboard sessions because you end up with vanilla, which is everyone's run it through ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, and they all basically have a PowerPoint presentation that feels very similar. I remember on Upwork, I used to post jobs and I would know that I could ask 2 hard hitting questions and 98% of people wouldn't spend any time on them. And now you'll get 100 great applications immediately. And I think the same thing's happening where AI is taking a lot of these work product type things and dumbing them down.
Yeah. I like to use like a real life scenario that we're struggling with and have them actually like trying to solve my business problem. So once again, it's back to the consulting thing, which is like, hey, can you actually like show me your mental construct for how you would approach this problem and what you do to solve it? So, and it's different for different types of roles and different types of things. So, But good call out there. I think whiteboard's probably way better than just like, here's my thing I produce. And it plus tells you see they're presenting in communication skills and how they can control the room and how they can sell. Uh,
Yeah.
the last piece is closing. That's of course, usually about compensation. But I also think it's a really important time to binding the manager and the candidate together. There's this thing in nature where like, you know, at some point, like you kind of like connect. Animals will like connect to each other and bind and be committed to each other for life. I forget what the exact biological term is, but I think of it kind of similar in the way of like you can really bind someone to you during the recruiting process and at the closing process by just simply telling them that like, I want to take a chance on you. I believe in you. You are going to be the one. You're going to be the person who does this for us. Saying those basic words just creates this like feeling of commitment between the two. And it's a really important piece to, use later when as you manage the person and also as you set expectations. In that,
Right.
I almost always tell people that when I say I'd like to talk about expectations and I want you to know that my expectations are ridiculously high. I expect you to do your absolute best possible work that you've ever done in your life in this job. And when you set that bar and that expectation and bind someone at the same time, not only can you close them better because they understand what kind of manager you are, but they also really ultimately like become your person. You become like, it's like, they're your brother or sister. You're on this journey together now. Once you've kind
I
of
think the other thing you bought too is the ability to push people hard, right? Like I I love that kind of stating that up front because then because sometimes people will get it. You have an opportunity to say, "Hey, I'm closing you. I'm excited to have you. We're making a bet on you. I've got these amazingly high expectations. I'm going to push you harder than anything." And I find if you ask that up front, it works. If you're 4 months in and then you try to push them,
very different. Now it's like, oh shit, now I have all this pressure. But at the time, it's like, oh shit, do I want to sign up for this or not? Because if they're like, you know what, you're right. I thought about it, and I really don't want to work that hard right now. Right? It's actually great. It sucks that it happened at the very end of the process, but it's great that you didn't hire the person.
I use a user manual. Like I write, this is how Andy ticks. I'm sure there's everyone that probably worked with you knew and could write that yourself themselves. But it's like, I'm just going to tell you exactly how I tick up front. And so there's no questions and, the person to weed themselves out. And, but at the same time, it also allows me to be myself, which I found is really nice. The other thing I was just say the other thing oh, go ahead, Brian, please.
I was just remembering we didn't cover. I don't know if we want to cover it or not, but
Yeah.
we didn't talk about back channeling.
I would love to if you're game to talk about it. I know we had a great time when we had our coffee on that side. I'd be fascinated to hear your take on that one.
Yeah, so I'm a big believer in back channeling. I like to back channel before I reach out to somebody.
Mhm.
And this way, and I'm not going to opine on the legality of the whole thing, but I believe that it's a much cleaner way to get back channel information about somebody prior to outreach on LinkedIn or another platform because you're not sort of in the process of recruiting. You're still outside the process of recruiting. You're saying, how do you know Andy? And was Andy great? Now, if you have somebody that you really know well who knows that person, that's gold. And you need to automatically back channel that. But oftentimes I'll actually back channel into the company. It's always a former company, never at the current company because I don't want to create issues there. But if I will reach out to someone at the former company who I think might have known this person, who I'm not even connected to, or somebody who I am connected to who I think knows that person, and I will leverage those common connections to basically get in contact with that person to ask them about that person. And really the question is like, were they exceptional? Were they amazing? What were they like? And anything you can glean from that is really valuable because those are all, there's no incentive either way in that situation, or at least that you can tell on the surface.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, now, oh no, that person was terrible. They were like a monster. Avoid.
Ironically, by doing it so early, it also gives them plausible deniability, which is, hey, I wasn't actually interviewing with Brian. He just pinged some people on me. So it's interesting to it may blow people up less than if they are like, hey, I'm talking to this person. I've had 2 interviews. They seem great. At
Yeah.
that point, it can go a lot worse.
Yeah. But if you should know for all the candidates out there, if Brian's reaching out to you, there's a good chance I've already back channeled you.
I love that. Well, Brian, we could probably spend another hour on this. Thank you for sharing these insights. I think it's fun to hear how somebody who's lived and breathed hiring for so many years at LinkedIn and then beyond thinks about it. So I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Andy. Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to be on your show, and good luck with Whispered. It seems to be a great product.
Thank you, Brian. Have a great day.